Welcome back, everybody. Today's deep dive, we're taking a look at embracing resistance, finding strength and wisdom in life's obstacles. I don't know about you, but the title itself, it really drew me in.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, who doesn't want a little more strength and wisdom when things get tough?
Right.
And get this, the book starts off with this analogy about a curling match, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's not what you'd expect, right, from a book about facing challenges.
Right.
But I think that's what makes this source so interesting. It uses this image of the sweepers, meticulously polishing the ice.
Yeah.
To kind of make this point about how friction or resistance can actually guide us towards our goals.
It's like you'd think you'd want the smoothest path possible to get where you're going.
Right.
But the book argues that too much ease can actually make us lose control. It's kind of like, when a car spins out on an icy road.
Yeah.
You need a little bit of friction to stay grounded.
Exactly. And this source takes it even a step further, connecting this idea of resistance to the Christian faith.
Oh, okay.
It suggests that resistance was introduced into the world after the fall of man, not just as a consequence of sin, but also as this necessary element for spiritual growth.
Okay, so instead of seeing resistance as like a punishment,
right,
we should see it as, a training ground?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
The source actually uses the image of a farmer tilling the soil after the fall, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard work, but it's what allows for growth and for something beautiful to emerge.
So the struggles we face in life,
yeah,
even the ones that feel really painful, can actually be opportunities to draw closer to God.
That's a key point the source is emphasizing.
Okay.
It argues that trying to, muscle through challenges solely on our own strength leads to this feeling of emptiness. You remember that passage from Ecclesiastes? Vanity of vanities, all is vanity.
Yeah.
It's like we're chasing after things that ultimately don't satisfy.
So where does true fulfillment come from then?
Well, the source suggests that it comes from embracing those moments of resistance with God, allowing them to kind of refine us and bring us closer to Him.
So it's not about conquering obstacles on our own,
right,
but about surrendering our need for control and allowing God to work through us.
Exactly.
That makes me think about times when I've tried to fix everything myself.
Yeah.
And I just ended up feeling more frustrated. Maybe there's a lesson there about letting go and trusting in something bigger than myself.
Absolutely. And the source provides some, I think, really practical guidance on how to do just that.
Okay.
It talks about the importance of humility.
Okay.
Of recognizing our need for God's grace.
Yeah.
Especially when we're struggling.
So it's not about denying the difficulty or pretending that everything's fine.
Right.
But about acknowledging our limitations and seeking God's help.
Exactly. And the source also highlights the power of prayer.
Oh, yeah.
Of turning to God for guidance and strength when we just feel overwhelmed by life's challenges.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we're not meant to go through those tough times alone.
This is making me think about how the source frames resistance as kind of a bridge, connecting us to God.
Yeah.
Instead of pushing us away from God, it actually draws us closer.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it challenges us to rethink how we approach those difficult situations in our lives.
Yeah.
What if instead of seeing them as these roadblocks, we saw them as opportunities to deepen our faith and experience God's presence in a more profound way?
Okay, so we've talked about this big idea of resistance being this tool for spiritual growth. But how does that actually play out in our everyday lives?
Yeah.
I mean, how do we go from feeling overwhelmed by challenges to seeing them as these opportunities for connection with God?
That's a great question. And the source provides some, I think, really insightful examples of how this embracing resistance thing works in practice.
Okay.
Let's dive into those next. One of the things that really struck me was how the source draws this parallel between the physical resistance athletes experience and the spiritual resistance that we all encounter in life. It's like those grueling training sessions that push them to their limits.
Right.
They're actually the key to achieving greater strength and endurance.
That makes me think about how I approach my own workouts.
Yeah.
When it starts to get tough, my instinct is to just kind of ease up or stop altogether.
Right.
But maybe there's a lesson there about pushing through those moments of discomfort to reach a new level of fitness.
Yeah.
Just like in our spiritual lives.
Exactly. And the source uses this powerful image to illustrate this point.
Okay.
The refiner's fire, that intense heat that burns away impurities.
Right.
To leave behind something stronger and more valuable.
Okay, so how do we apply that to, dealing with a difficult coworker or going through financial setback.
Right.
How do those situations become a refiner's fire for us?
Well, the Source emphasizes that it's not about like enjoying the pain
Yeah.
or pretending that everything's fine.
Right.
It's about recognizing those challenges as opportunities for growth and transformation.
But sometimes it's really hard to see things that way when you're in the thick of it, you know?
Absolutely. The Source acknowledges that.
Yeah.
But it encourages us to kind of shift our perspective
Okay.
from why is this happening to me
Right.
to what can I learn from this?
Mm.
How is God using this situation to refine me?
Okay.
And it highlights the importance of leaning on God for support during those tough times.
So it's not about denying the pain or pretending everything's okay.
Right.
But about choosing to see the situation through a different lens.
Yeah.
A lens of faith and trust in God's plan.
Exactly. And the Source suggests that when we do that, we can actually start to experience a sense of peace and even gratitude amidst the challenges.
You know, it's interesting because the Source talks about how, even in the Bible,
Yeah.
resistance wasn't always presented as a negative thing. Like the story of the Tower of Babel, for example.
Right. That's a great example. You remember how after the flood, humanity was unified, speaking one language,
Right.
that they decided to build this tower to reach heaven,
Yeah.
essentially challenging God's authority.
And that's when God introduced resistance by creating different languages.
Right.
Scattering people across the earth.
And here's the thing.
Okay.
The Source suggests that this wasn't simply a punishment. It was a way to kind of redirect humanity's efforts
Okay.
to force them to rely on God rather than their own ambitions.
So it's like saying, okay, you want to reach for greatness? Fine.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to do it through collaboration, understanding different perspectives,
Right.
and ultimately acknowledging your need for God's guidance.
Exactly. And that theme of recognizing our limitations and surrendering to God's will
Yeah.
is really central to the Source's message.
It makes you think about how often we try to control everything and force our own plans,
Right.
instead of trusting in God's timing and direction.
Absolutely. And the Source suggests that when we surrender that need for control and embrace the resistance we face,
Yeah.
we open ourselves up to a deeper level of spiritual growth and intimacy with God.
So it's not about eliminating resistance altogether,
Right.
but about transforming our relationship with it.
That's a great way to put it. And the Source offers some, I think, really practical advice on how to do that.
Okay.
For example, it talks about developing a mindset of gratitude, even for the challenges we face.
Gratitude. But how can you be grateful for something that's causing you pain or difficulty?
That's where the shift in perspective comes in.
Okay.
The Source suggests that when we choose to see resistance as an opportunity for growth and refinement, we can actually start to appreciate it for what it is.
Oh.
A gift, albeit a challenging one,
Yeah.
that draws us closer to God.
So it's about recognizing that even in those tough times, God is present, working for our good,
Right.
even if we can't see it in the moment.
Exactly. And that brings us to another powerful tool the Source highlights, prayer. It's about bringing those struggles to God, acknowledging our need for His help,
Yeah.
and asking for His guidance and strength to navigate those challenges.
So it's not about gritting our teeth and trying to muscle through it on our own.
Right.
It's about acknowledging our human limitations and tapping into a source of strength that's beyond ourselves.
Precisely. And the Source reminds us that God is always with us, even in the midst of our struggles.
Yeah.
It uses that beautiful phrase, Emmanuel, God with us. It's a reminder that we're never alone,
Yeah.
no matter how difficult things get.
You know, hearing you talk about all this makes me think about how counterintuitive this whole idea is. We're so conditioned to avoid pain and seek comfort.
Right.
But this Source is saying, hey, maybe those moments of resistance are actually where the real growth happens.
That's exactly it. And it challenges us to reason what it means to live a truly fulfilling life. It's not about seeking constant ease and comfort,
Right.
but about embracing the challenges that shape us, refine us, and ultimately draw us closer to God.
Okay, so we've talked about this shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And the importance of prayer. Are there any other practical techniques the Source offers for embracing resistance?
Absolutely. The Source delves into several other key practices that can help us navigate those difficult seasons with grace and resilience.
Okay.
Let's explore those next.
Okay, so besides prayer and that shift in perspective, what else does the Source suggest for actually embracing resistance in our lives?
Well, one thing it talks about is the importance of finding meaning in our suffering. You know, it's not about pretending the pain isn't real,
Right.
but about asking, like, what is God teaching me through this?
Yeah.
how can I use this experience to, grow closer to him and help others?
That reminds me of the idea of offering up our suffering for others.
Mm-hmm.
It's like saying, okay, this is really hard, but I'm going to trust that God can use this pain for something good,
Right.
even if I can't see it right now.
Exactly. And the Source suggests that when we do that,
Yeah.
it can actually transform our experience of suffering. It doesn't make the pain go away,
Right.
but it gives it a purpose,
Yeah.
a meaning beyond ourselves.
So it's like that saying, suffering is inevitable, but meaning is optional.
Right.
We can choose to find meaning in our struggles, even if it's really hard to see at first.
Absolutely. And the Source highlights another powerful practice that can help us through those tough times, community.
Okay.
It emphasizes the importance of surrounding ourselves with people who can support us,
Yeah.
encourage us, and remind us of God's love when we're feeling lost or discouraged.
That makes me think about how isolating it can be to go through something difficult alone.
Yeah.
Having people to pray with you or offer practical help or just listen without judgment can make a huge difference.
Right. And the Source reminds us that we're not meant to walk this journey alone. We need each other, especially when we're facing those uphill battles.
Okay, so we've talked about finding meaning,
Yeah.
leaning on community, shifting our perspective in prayer.
Right.
Anything else the Source suggests for embracing resistance?
One more thing that really stood out to me was the emphasis on surrender.
Okay.
Not giving up, but surrendering our need to control everything, to have all the answers,
Yeah.
to fix it all ourselves.
So it's about acknowledging that we're not God,
Right.
that we don't have all the power, and that sometimes the best thing we can do is just let go and trust in His plan.
Exactly. And the Source suggests that this act of surrender can actually be incredibly liberating. It frees us from the burden of trying to carry everything ourselves and allows us to rest in God's love and grace.
It's like saying, okay, God, I'm letting go of the reins. I trust that you know what you're doing, even if I don't understand it right now.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And the Source suggests that when we surrender to God's will, even in the midst of our struggles, we open ourselves up to a level of peace and joy that we could never find on our own.
This whole idea of embracing resistance is so countercultural.
Right.
We live in a world that's all about avoiding pain and seeking comfort.
Exactly.
But this Source is challenging us to rethink that approach.
It is challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly hopeful because it suggests that even in the midst of our struggles, even when things feel impossible,
Right.
God is present, working for our good, and using those very challenges to draw us closer to Him.
So maybe those moments of resistance, the ones we tend to dread or avoid,
Right.
are actually invitations to a deeper, more meaningful relationship with God?
That's exactly what this Source is suggesting. It's a call to see those challenges not as roadblocks, but as stepping stones on our journey toward wholeness,
Right.
toward becoming the people God created us to be.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
Yeah, it really is.
I know I'm walking away with a lot to think about.
Me too. And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to embrace the resistance in their own lives and see where God might be leading them through those challenges.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.